Witajmy Vash. That is the Czech name for we welcome you. Today I'm going to show you how I made kolaches in the bread maker. My mother did not make them in the bread maker. She did that all by hand, and that's because in her time they did not have one. I will read you the recipe first, and then I will show you how I do it. Put in a bowl 1 stick of butter, 1 teaspoon salt, 1/3 cup powdered milk, 1/3 cup instant potatoes, 1/3 cup sugar, 1 cup of milk, 2 eggs beaten, 2 teaspoons lemon juice, which is optional. Add to milk mixture. Add 3 cups flour, make a hole, and sprinkle 2 tablespoons dry yeast. Put on dough setting, which on most bread makers is the number 7 setting, and watch it for the first couple minutes. If it's not forming a ball, you will have to help it by scraping the sides. Now I will show you how I do this. First of all, I will cut my butter up and put it in the microwave for a few seconds to melt down before I add my other ingredients to it. I will start that on 20 seconds, but you'll have to go according to your own microwave, as each one is a little different. It will need more time as it has not melted. And I have my my 1/3 cup of sugar measured here. And while I'm waiting for that, I will beat my 2 eggs. Sometimes when I beat these eggs, I do use the electric mixer, but this works just as well. Now to this melted butter, I will add my 1/3 cup of sugar, one-third cup of powdered milk, and 1/3 cup of potato flakes. I'm just stirring that up a little bit. Now I will add my 1 cup of milk. And I just use the 2% milk. I just stir that up a little bit. And since the milk is very cold, so I will put it back in the microwave for a few more seconds. When you put this liquid in the bread pan warm, it really helps to make it rise a little faster and nicer. I usually like to scrape out all of this. And to this liquid, I will now add my beaten eggs. Instead of sifting the flour, which I don't do anymore, I put it in the bowl, and that's called fluffing it. So, and that seems to work very well. And to this flour, when I put that in, I will add my 1 teaspoon of salt. And salt is a very necessary ingredient, because without it, it would not have a flavor. Now I'll make a little funnel in here, and that's where I'll add my yeast. And I put 2 tablespoons in there. And then I cover it up like that. And before I put this in the bread maker, I do like to check, make sure there's something that I didn't forget. Butter, salt, milk, potatoes, sugar, eggs, flour. And my yeast is in it. Now we will put it in the bread maker. And set it on the number 7 setting. And this is where I watch it those first 5 minutes or so. Make sure that all of that flour is scraped off the sides and it starts forming a ball. You can tell that it's finished when it does not stick to the sides. Sometimes you may have to sprinkle more flour on it, and that's the reason why you watch it. This is how the ball should look. It should not be sticking to the sides, and it should be nice and firm. And then we just let it continue. I already dumped out my dough as it was raised in the bread maker. Now I'm going to sprinkle a little flour on this before I start rolling it out. My preference is Robin Hood flour, but that's everybody to each his own. And I do like to use a pastry cloth because then you don't have to add hardly any more flour to it. Then I pat it out. And I try to make a nice rectangle because it's easier to cut. But that doesn't always happen. Out of this batch, I usually get right around 20 kolaches. It just depends on how big I make them. I don't like them real full, real big, so it's whatever everybody likes. There are several fillings you can use. Our favorite is the cherry with cream cheese. Now this is rolled to about 1/4 or maybe a little bit more, but that seems to work the best for me. If I roll it out too thin, then they seem to be really flat. And I use a pizza cutter to try to make them nice and square. There's many fruit flavors that you can add. Sometimes I make raspberry, strawberry, apricot, prune, poppy seed, just about any flavor. The cherry filling I usually buy in a big container because that's the one I make the most of. The other fillings you can get tubes of them. The leftover pieces, well, you try to do the best you can. Sometimes you patch them up. Sometimes if they're too big, then I like to make the rolls out of them, and we would call them rohliki. That's why it's kind of important to try to roll it out so you don't have to try to piece them together. But this is how I make the kolache. You have to stretch it a little bit. And if you can, it's really nice to have a nice square because then they form easier. Today I'm making them rather big. And if I wouldn't be able to work with these right away, I would have to cover them with a plastic bag or plastic because they would dry very quickly. This is the tube that I buy the cream cheese filling in it. And if you buy other flavors like your apricot or your strawberry or blueberry, they all come in these tubes. And I just squeeze globs, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And I take a knife and I spread it apart, or nicely on there, because you don't want to leave that whole glob on there. And then I'll put the cherry filling on there. And the more often you make them, the more you get used to what the dough should feel like. Then I take the two corners and I put them over each other. Make sure to squeeze this really tight, because if you do not, they could open up during baking and then it does not look nice at all. And my mother told me that my grandma always told her to make a nice kolache, they should have these 4 eyes. Then I put them on my pan. And after you put them on your pan, they have to raise. Depends on how warm your house is, but it'll take about 15 or 20 minutes to raise before you put them in the oven. It's not always easy to get each one exactly alike in size, but just do your best. They will still taste good no matter what. And a lot of people really like more filling in there than to be skimpy with the filling. I think I got this one a little too big, but somebody will eat it anyway. The smaller you make them, the more you will get out of the batch. And if you make them a little bit bigger, well, then you don't get quite as many. I do make them sometimes the raspberry with the cream cheese on the bottom. I've also made the strawberry with the cream cheese on the bottom. Just do it all to your liking. Now I will be covering them and I will set them aside to raise. These cookie sheets do have covers with them. Sometimes I use the cover instead of just putting a plastic bag. You have to put something over them or they will dry out. This is the covers that I like to use while they're raising. It kind of keeps the moisture in and seems to help them raise faster. One of the ways I tell if they're raised enough is I like to poke my finger in the side, and when it leaves a little dent in there like that, that pretty much is telling me. Now these have been raising for about 15 minutes. It just depends on how warm it is in your house. That'll make a difference too. So now I have my oven preheated. I preheated it at 400 and I'm putting them in the oven. And I set my timer for 9 minutes. When you take them out of the oven, you need to brush them with butter. I had these in for 9 minutes at 400. And Every oven is different, so you have to go accordingly, but they should be a nice golden brown when you take them out. And now I will put them on a cooling rack, and when they're cooled, I put them in plastic bags. Everybody has their own containers they like to use. They really don't last very long, because if you have anybody in the household, they will even like to eat them very warm. This is how I make the kolaches in the bread maker. I hope everyone enjoys this video and has good luck with their kolaches. Thank you for watching this.